Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be doing a deep dive on e-tuning with the VB WRX, and this is the video where I talk about me e-tuning my 2022 WRX, but this is going to be a deeper video that I've worked on with DMann Tuning and working through some of the tips, tricks, things you need to know, things to get the best results, everything you basically need to know. This is going to be a long and in-depth video, so even though this is going to be a very informational video, I highly recommend sticking through it. If you have a hard time with informational videos, just turn the playback speed up to like 1.5. Otherwise, I am going to show you a few things. It won't just be me sitting here the entire time. I'm going to show you how to log, how to install and basically start the original log parameters so you can do all your logging. I'm going to show you how all that works. I'm also going to talk about just the long-term process and absolutely everything you need to know. So by the end of this video, you'll be an absolute expert on e-tuning, what it is, why you do it, what the process is like specifically with DMann. I'll give you a little bit of a rundown of why I used him, but we're going to have an entire separate video. And again, I've worked with Anthony over at DMann Tuning to kind of like add some things here that are really important to the entire process. And if you're already e-tuned, you should still watch the video because one, this will give you a full understanding of what you did, but it will also really give you an understanding of how whoever tuned your car pairs with, in my opinion, the best e-tuner for the VB right now in the nation, just so you can get an idea of what the differences are. And also just really understand that if you're thinking about e-tuning, let's say you're on a warranty and you're considering dropping your warranty, I'll give you a process of what that actually looks like and how much is involved with that and everything you need to know. So let's dive right in. So the quick just recap of what is e-tuning. E-tuning is like kind of the middle ground between an off-the-shelf tune and a pro tune. A pro tune is obviously when you have your car at a site on a dyno tuner, wheels on rollers or attached to the hubs, and you actually have your tuner sitting in your car and tuning your car live. This is usually the best option because the car and the tuner are present. You can look at individualized conditions and all that stuff. But because the VB WRX is one, almost entirely closed loop, and two, generally a newer car, so you've got less problems with the car, it's actually been very, very resilient in e-tuning. I would say e-tuning the VA WRX, which is the 15 to 21 and the STIs, is okay. It's usually still better to pro tune if you can. If you can't, e-tuning is also a much better option than an off the shelf. But with that said, with the VB, there isn't a lot more to be gained or a lot more value, let's say, in pro tuning than e-tuning, especially if you're not spending a ton of money on parts. What e-tuning is working with a tuner remotely and doing data logs of different files and tunes to continuously and eventually tune your car with a tune, but going through the process of doing it over a week, week and a half, and actually sending logs relevant to tunes where the tuner can then adjust every single time. Now, in terms of the best e-tuners, there's a reason I wanted to make this video with Anthony over at DMann. I do consider him to be the best option, and there's a few reasons behind that. One, he's got years and years of experience. He's tuned something like 9,000 plus vehicles, most of them being Subarus. But the biggest thing is he spent his career tuning around safety and not necessarily pushing the limits. Now, that might sound like, oh, I want to tune my car, I want the most possible power. But the reality is he's still going to get you there, but he's not going to put the car in danger to get an extra 4, 5, 6 wheel horsepower, which is totally not worth it just to have a number on paper, because those few wheel horsepower are not going to be something that you can actually feel. And he's built his entire career based on, creating tunes and maps that are pushing, as you would if you were going past an OTS, but also balancing the long-term drivability and safety. And in terms of the VB, he just has a lot of data out there where you've got people running his tunes for a very, very long time and you're not seeing a ton of issues. I know that I'm just releasing this on the channel, but I've been running this tune for a pretty darn long time. I wanted to wait a little bit just to make sure that, all the things, one, I'm saying are true, but two, I wanted to give some time for him and I to really work out some kinks on what would be talked about in this video. Okay, so let's say you want to e-tune. What are the first steps? Well, you have kind of two options. And one of the nice things about DMann is you can buy his Flash and Go, which is still kind of an e-tune, but it's almost off the shelf, where he's made a tune based on certain performance parts that you put on the car that's slightly adjusted to the year, where you are, the type of gas, etc. Or you can go with a full e-tune. Obviously there's a difference in cost, but with both options, you're kind of the derivative of what's happened is going in the same way. So in this video, I'm going to talk about the actual e-tuning process, which is custom to your car. I still recommend doing that, but the Flash and Go tunes are awesome, right? You can actually go basically copy the tune that I have on my specific VB and buy it from his site without having to go through the whole process, and it's a lot cheaper. But you can quite literally copy my build and use the same tune because we developed that tune for this car and for these parts. But let's say you're going to ETune. What are you doing first? Well, you don't need any extra parts, but if you want to, I have an ETS intake and just an axle back exhaust actually right now. But the first step, other than those parts, you'll need is a Cobb access port. Now, I've got a video on the channel on how to install a Cobb access port, but you'll need to buy a Cobb access port. If you're unfamiliar with the buying process of that, check that other video on the channel. But once you get your Cobb access port, you're basically ready to go. You're going to reach out to him. So if you're doing full e-tuning, the first step is to reach out and fill out a tune specification document that he will send you when you purchase your e-tune. And what this is basically going to do is give him all the details he needs to know about your car, where you are, the type of fuel, and all that kind of stuff. Then the process starts, and this is where it gets fun and interesting, and we've got some steps. He's going to send you a couple things, and part of the process, and one of the reasons I actually like working with Anthony, is he simplifies a lot of it for you. So with a lot of tuners, depending on their experience, some will send you pre-packaged log parameters, some of them won't. He sends 2 files. In your first email, you're going to get 2 files. You're going to get your first map, and that's going to kind of, we'll talk about that in a second, and you're going to get log parameters. The first thing you actually need to do is you need to open up your Cobb accessport manager on your computer, and then you're going to import those files. Now, the first thing to know here is if you're going through the accessport manager, you can press the import button and bring over the map. But if you press the import button on the accessport manager, it will not actually find the file. What you need to do is go back to 2005, like we all do, and like most people do anyways today, and you just need to take the file and drag it into your accessport manager. I know that sounds stupid, but it's one of the biggest things that people get hung up on, and it's actually something that Anthony, it's like one of his standout problems that he's facing right now, where people kind of like hang up on that. So yeah, you can't find it if you import it because the accessport manager just doesn't look for that file type. You just need to drag it into the accessport manager and it will load itself onto the accessport. Once you have both files onto the accessport, you can then take your accessport and get it hooked up to the car. If you don't know how to hook it up to your car, I also have a video on the channel about how to do that. But once it's on the car, you're going to get ready to start your first log. Now, before we actually talk about that first log, you then need to make sure your accessport is set to log with the pre-packaged log parameter file and not the automatic logs, because if you don't do that, the accessport will log so many different variables that it will be the file will be huge and your eTuner won't be able to sort through all the parameters. So let's just jump into the car right now and I will show you guys how to log in and set up those log parameters. All right, what we're gonna do is pretty easy. We're just gonna start at the gauges. We're gonna go up to setup. We're going to press configure data logging. It's gonna take us to this. We're gonna go up. We're gonna press again, and then we're going to do load preset. Load a data log preset. We're going to click that. Then we have the one that we've loaded in from our accessport manager. We're going to click that and we're done, and we're going to log. Okay, awesome. So you have the log parameters set, you have that file set up. Now you are going to do your first logs. Now I have a few notes here. So this is where we start getting into the important stuff and I've got my phone because I'm going to talk about some of the notes. There are a lot of ways that this can go wrong, and it's really important as somebody, like if you don't fully understand how tuning your car and working with an accessport could go wrong, don't mess around until you understand. So first and foremost, when you are uploading, installing your Cobb accessport, uploading a tune, any of those things, you need to make sure that power is not lost on your vehicle. I have to say this, and I know that it sounds like self-explanatory, but that can severely damage the vehicle, meaning that it can damage your ECU. You might really do some electrical damage to your car. What does that mean? So a few tips, especially when you're first loading it, if you live in a hot environment, I'll say it out loud. I like to pop the hood open just for when you are doing the running and turning off and all that kind of stuff. You'll eventually need to pop the hood open, but that's easy. Doors closed, automatic headlights off, heated seats off, head unit off, turn that head unit off. Basically turn off every piece of auxiliary power so that when you're doing these updates, right, it can be very, very, very focused on just using power. Also, if you haven't driven your car in a while, go drive for 30 or 40 minutes before you do any of that. Charge your battery. This is critical. The next big tip is after every reflash, especially the first one, especially when you first install the accessport, but every reflash, you have to understand that these cars, don't like just coming back on and being all ready to go. Quite literally, the readiness of a lot of the aspects of the car aren't ready. You know, you have to put miles on to have your different aspects of the vehicle come to readiness, right? So a few things with that. So when you first flash the car, every time you flash the car, what I like to do, and this is just a tip for car safety, right, and the best results, is I turn the car on after the reflash, I pop the hood, you let it fully idle, right, to complete temperature, and then you give it another 5 minutes. That's my rule of thumb. You do that every time you reflash between maps and the first time. The next thing is you need to get your front O2 sensor and AVCS readied up into a ready position, and that can be kind of tricky and hard with this car, with these VBs. Same with the VAs. The VAs were actually very hard. So the next step before you do any logging is you're going to drive a extremely easy, I honestly, like most tuners will tell you 5 to 10 city miles. I'm gonna say, and this is city miles, you really don't wanna get onto the highway because you don't wanna push your RPMs, but I'm gonna say 10 to 15 miles. You wanna do about 10 to 15 miles of city driving, keeping under 3,000 or maybe under 3,300 RPM. We're talking very, very conservative driving and coming to a stop and go a fair amount so that you can get the car readied up, you can get things going, you know, and the car has the time to like reset. You're gonna do this between every flash. I know that's a lot of work, but it's really, really important to the car and the data that you're sending the tuner. The next thing you can do, and this is actually really critical, is, and I probably should have mentioned this earlier, either start with a full tank of the gas that you most intend on using during your ownership, or start with very little gas and fill up before you do your data logs. It's better to start with a full tank of gas. Make sure you're getting premium fuel from the most common gas station you go to, because you want the most repeatable results. And just make sure this is high quality gas. This is where getting good gas becomes really, really, really important for your car. We're talking the difference between failure and not. Okay, now we're gonna get into the logging process. Let's jump over to the car right now, and I'm gonna show you how to do a log and start a log. Let's jump over there. That's a cold start right there. I don't know if you guys can even hear me. My cold starts are pretty loud. Let's close the door because the cold starts in this car are very, very loud. So let's say you have your log parameters installed in your car. This is how you're going to log. I really like the window accessport mount because it's easy to drive the car and log. All you're gonna do is once they're set and everything, you got your 3 little things there that'll indicate it's logging. You're just going to literally press the button. You're logging. Do your thing, collect data. When you're done, click it again. Your logging's complete. That's all you gotta do. Super easy to log, and every time you log, you're gonna press it and then press it again. But you don't want to log too much, 8 to 10 seconds max, nothing over 10 seconds, unless you're doing one specific pull, which takes a little bit longer than 10 seconds that we're gonna talk about, but that's how you data log, and that's all you need to do. All right, now that you know how to start a log, the first log, right, and I'm gonna read off my phone because this is very specific. We are going to get a log of the existing condition of your car. That's the most important. So this is 2 separate warm idle AC off logs, 10 seconds each, only 10 seconds. 2 warm idle AC on logs, 10 seconds each. That's because he needs to see what the loading of the AC is from a voltage and amperage perspective. Then we're gonna do light cruising at steady state in vacuum, which is really important, at 40 miles, 50 miles, 60 miles, and 70 miles, all each 8 to 10 seconds. Never go over 10 seconds because it's just too much data. 2 to 3 logs of light acceleration, and that's going to be under 2 PSI, that's really critical, from stop through gears 1 through 4, never exceeding 4,000 RPM, and again, never exceeding 2 PSI. That's about 20 or 30% throttle max. And we're looking for natural shifts, as if you were just driving and you're not trying to get any power. And then you're gonna do 1 second gear wide open throttle from 2,500 to 6,000 RPM, second gear only, and just send what you have. Just don't do this multiple times, just send what you have, and there. So this is giving him a really good understanding of the vehicle itself and all of those things. Now what's really critical, this is actually the most important log out of any of the other logs that you're gonna do, and you can already tell that there's aspects to this log that you actually have to be really cautious and knowledgeable about your car. So if you're not comfortable off the bat being able to drive under 2 PSI and maintaining those requirements, go out and practice before you do the log, right? That's really, really critical. Be able to practice and deliver the right results. Once you get those logs, you're gonna plug your accessport back into your computer, and then you are going to open up your accessport manager and you're gonna drag the log files into an email and return it to Anthony. Anthony, in then 1 to 2 days, is typically what it was, and sometimes even sooner, sometimes overnight, pretty quickly. I would say the entire process took me about a week, and there was some planned vacation in there where I was gone for a few days, so it was a pretty quick process. But you're gonna return those files and then he'll send you back a second map. The second map, we're gonna repeat the entire process of warming the car up, doing the city miles, doing all of those things to make sure everything's ready. We're just looking for the most repeatable data for the tuner. This is what's critical here. And then we're going to do wide open throttle, third gear pull from 2,500 to 6,500 RPM, which is just above red line, full throttle, and then we're gonna return it. After you've logged that wide open throttle, you're gonna do the same process and you're gonna download it onto your computer, you're gonna return that in an email, and then you're gonna repeat that process at least 2 more times. You're gonna do a third and a fourth. You might do a fifth depending on your setup, and a sixth depending on your setup, and if a few changes need to be made around the fourth, you might have a fifth there. But then at that point, you're going to get your final map, which is going to include either the final map without rev hang elimination or a final map with rev hang elimination. I'm running the rev hang elimination. Not that these cars have a terrible amount of rev hang. They do have some rev hang. That map greatly corrects all negative first gear issues. It also has a slight burble effect, so it makes the car sound absolutely ridiculously good. I'm very much in love with it. So I haven't actually even run the other map at all because the other map just wouldn't be as exciting as this map. And then you have your final map. So what's important to do once you have your final map is make sure you delete or remove at least the staged maps that you were doing testing throughout the process off your accessport so you don't accidentally revert back to one of those and start doing some driving. One thing to note is in the last 2 maps, he's gonna take off a lot of the kind of like knock reduction features so that you might see a little bit more knock on those maps, and that's just him fine tuning. So there shouldn't be super worried if that's the case, but make sure you report any findings. And then once you have your final map, you're good to go. Now throughout this process, one of the most important things that you do, whether it's him or with any other tuner, is that you report anything that's happening. So when I would send back these files, and a lot of tuners won't ask for this, but it's better to do your due diligence than just say it. I talk about the exterior conditions, how hot it was, generally if I changed the place in the country I was, meaning the elevation was different, whether it was raining, whether it was sunny. I included nighttime, daytime temperature, I think I already said that. I included all that information after each data log, and that's really important so that they can understand and adjust the car to fine-tune the best log for you. Now coming out of that, a few things right off the bat that I want to talk about before we get further into the process, because I think it's just really important to hear. With any type of tuning, right, your gas is radically the most important part of the car. Your dam will drop with tuning, you will see knock, and it's more about how quickly that corrects than anything else. And a good example is, I put in like half a tank of gas from a gas station maybe 3 weeks ago, and my dam dropped, right? I started seeing knock values, blah, 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 blah. I drove the car a little bit during that. I was really conservative. I put new gas from a different gas station in, and it continually increased the dam, right? And then as I got through more of that fuel and filled up again, it went back to normal. So your dam is going to fluctuate over time if you don't have good fuel. That's why it's so important. And I say that now because during the process, it's important to have good fuel. The e-tuning process is designed so you can continually use your vehicle as you're doing it. So you're never down, you're never not able to drive. Each map, even though you're logging, you can daily drive on. That means if you're burning more fuel, you need to make sure you're replacing it with high quality of fuel, because that makes such a difference during the e-tuning process of this car, and ultimately is going to be a big impact on how safe your ride is and how much power you can make. So hearing all that, that's basically the entire process with DMann. Now, if anything differs from other e-tuners, and it sounds like there's more involved in that process than a tuner that you've worked with, this is a good time to reflect and really understand the difference between somebody that's really good at what they do and somebody that maybe doesn't have as much experience. And I'm not here to bash any tuners. All I'm here to say is experience is king when it comes to tuning, because everybody starts from basically nothing and is self-taught, and experience is where long-term derivative values come from. And that's really, really important. And I'm not saying that there can't be great tuners out there that are just getting started, but if you want the safest option for your car, going with somebody that's very, very extensive and knows what they're doing is really, really important. Now, if you've heard all that and that sounds like a lot of work, you can actually go to DMann's website. And I know that I'm plugging him a lot. I'm doing that because I worked with him making this video, not because like I have any other incentive to do it. I just genuinely think that's the best option for your car. And if you want to look back at the history of this channel, I've always just published the information that's best for your car, right? So I just want to be clear up front. I'm not being paid to say any of this stuff. I want that to be abundantly clear. But one of the things that I really like about the way that that's structured is there are still these like off the shelf, they're like flash and go tunes that are still not necessarily like OTS tunes and that they're generally made for all cars ever. They're still specifically designed for different sets of parts and all that stuff. And you can actually just go look at the tune, buy those specific parts, and then put that tune and those parts in your car and be good to go. So one of the other things that if you just do like a Cobb off-the-shelf tune, you have to make sure you're very compliant to the the parts that Cobb requires you to have for those off-the-shelf tunes. So that's one of the advantages. I always still think e-tuning is the best way to do it. You get the interaction with Anthony, you get interaction with the tuner, you get more, you know, space to ask questions and all those things. Your car will make more power a little bit. It's a little bit more specific to your ride and increases the safety. Although the flash and goes are still safe, it just increases the safety. And that's basically the process. There is like you're probably much more exposed to risk during the process than after. These cars have done fairly well from an engine perspective with these tunes. As long as they're tuned within some level of safety, they are lasting a long time, and there aren't a lot of instances of blown engines. You know, knock on wood that doesn't happen to me, and now that I say it, but that's generally the case. With that said, these cars have been really resilient, and obviously I got my car tuned really soon into its warranty period, which I know a lot of people kind of battle with. But you know, when you're not trying to, you know, be the first person on the moon with the amount of power you're making, there are a lot, like thousands of examples of people making relatively decent numbers and it being relatively safe to do, and it's fairly low cost to be able to make that power. I will tell you, this car, like a tuned WRX, is not the same vehicle as a stock WRX. They are almost entirely different vehicles. This car is significantly faster than a tuned STI that doesn't have like a new turbo and all kinds of like expensive stuff, right? I'm like arguably much faster than one. I like now maybe much faster is a stretch, but I'm like an STI, even with just a turbo, I'm still making probably 30 or 40 more wheel horsepower, or just about, but I'm also a much lighter car, or I'm also a lighter car. So this car is making ridiculous power for not that much money. The driving experience is entirely different. I will say, just from a day-to-day, like forget about making power, the smoothness and linearity of the power that comes from tuning the car is worth it just for that, right? The first gear, second gear, the comfort around those gears, third gear even, are much more comfortable. The car drives way closer to design as well with the amount of boost that it starts making. You start seeing performance in the highway make a big difference. Also combined with the fact that this car is making 30 to 40% more power with just an intake. That's absolutely insane. So I know this was a pretty in-depth video, and I know that I talked about a lot of different aspects of tuning, and at the surface it feels fairly easy. You know, it's just really important that you follow those steps to the T, because again, the biggest risk that you're going to take most likely if you're going with a good tuner is just the process of like plugging in and reflashing your car, like plugging in your access port and reflashing your car. The problems that you can face with that, if you have a problem, can be catastrophic, and it's a really, really big deal. So you want to be really, really careful with that process. You also want to be very, very cognizant of every time you reflash, making sure you're doing your city miles, you're getting your driving in, you're readying up all the aspects of the car, you're getting the car fully warm. Every time I did a log, I was driving, you know, I was trying to put on like 20 miles in between, and then I was driving the car for like 30 or 40 minutes before actually doing the log. So it wasn't heat soaked, but it was fully warmed up. There was not an aspect of the car that wasn't warmed up. It was fully ready to go in operation and all those things. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. I know this was a little bit longer. We're gonna have a lot more videos specifically about the tuning of the car, how much power I made, the process specifically with my car, and like everything else you need to know about tuning these vehicles. I've got a whole series coming out along with the series of just like how performance parts work. So stay tuned. If you're not subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing. And you know, if you need tuning services, I highly recommend DMann Tuning. I did a lot of research beforehand, talked to a lot of people, and obviously worked with him to make this video and to add some of the tips and tricks that are in this video that you're not going to otherwise get, or you will from him, but that are big problems just across the board in the industry. So hope you guys enjoyed the video. I will see you guys in the next video.